And welcome, everyone. My name is Arthur Patterson. I'm an independent taxonomy consultant, and over the past 2 decades, I've been specialized in building digital content experiences. And while creating great content takes a lot of effort, getting it to the right consumer is equally important, and that's often overlooked. So we're going to talk about how taxonomy terms can get content in multiple places. But AI has reshaped how we're classifying and surfacing content, though legacy methods still have value. And my goal today is to help you understand how to navigate long-established technologies, but also emerging ones, to make smarter choices for content classification strategies. To clarify, my focus is going to be on content. You know, we talk a lot about vectorization and so forth, but it's not data, it's content in this realm. So I wanted to thank you for having interest in this topic, and I wanted to thank everyone here at the summit. It's been really interesting. There's been a lot of knowledge transfer so far, and I'm learning a lot myself. And also thanks to the folks at Progress for having me back. I've been a Semaphore user and customer for 5 years, but I've also been tasked with exploring alternatives to rules-based natural language processing classification at both Salesforce, a former employer of mine, and my current consulting client, Microsoft. So before we really get into things, I wanted to test the waters, and could I have a show of hands if any of you are responsible for or involved in classifying content? Okay, great. And of those, how many do it manually the old-fashioned way? Okay. And what about through machine learning? Okay. And through NLP? No, that would be me. And is anyone using agents yet to classify their content? No. Well, is the agent doing the task where it runs it through a natural language processor or machine learning processor? Yeah, okay. I'd like to talk to you afterward because that's a lot of things are going that way. And is anyone using taxonomy terms to measure their content or analyze how it's being used? Okay, we talk about that later. And anyone have RAG search or data vectorization in place? Okay, thank you. Kind of gives me a feel. We're going to have plenty of time for Q&A at the end, but feel free to pipe up too, not a problem. And as a reminder, we're talking about content and not data. So I'm an independent consultant. I'm not representing any clients today, but my specialty is structured and unstructured content with a primary focus of getting the right content to the right user at the right time in their journey. And that's the textbook definition for content strategy. I've been building dynamic websites for Stanford, Berkeley Lab, Salesforce, and now through Revel Design, that's the R on this slide, I have been working with Microsoft, where I'm leveraging taxonomies to dynamically surface content on 35 of their commercial product websites. So like I said, I started with a manual classification, and when I was at Stanford, we kind of just manually tagged content, and it was really easy. We created a taxonomy. There were drop-down menus, and you could classify content by discipline. And they had organizational behavior and finance as 2 examples. They're not going to overlap. So that was great. It's like, okay, tagging content is pretty straightforward. But then I got to Salesforce, and we had over 200 content creators, and everyone had to create their own content. So there was a lot of inconsistency, and the product marketers are pretty savvy, and they figured out, hey, if I can tag this content with every single product, this listing for this event is going to show up everywhere. And they thought that was really great, and unfortunately, that hurts the end user, and that is really who you want to benefit from your classification techniques. And so what we had to do is we had to take that out of their hands. And that's when we knocked on Semaphore's door and said, listen, can you help us with the content classification process? And they said, sure. And it was natural language processing. And what we did on top of that is we created a Slack feedback loop. And so what would happen is the content would be classified once the page was activated, and then the content owner would get a Slack message saying, here's your content, here's the URL, and here's what we classified it with. Do you agree or disagree? And we wanted some disagreement, but we got very little. And the reason you want that is you want to be able to tweak the rules. And you can't tweak the rules if you don't have feedback. But this is all, what was really important was there was a human in the loop. And it was able to validate what what we suspected was correct, and it was also an area for improvement. So always having a human in the loop is a great idea. Okay, so this is kind of, I was trying to find an example of what if we asked AI to put together an encyclopedia for us? And we have the old, if you remember the encyclopedias, in the print age, they used to be, volume 1s through 20 or something like that. But here we're like, okay, we're going to ask vectorization and clustering to put together an encyclopedia. And the thing is we don't have too much visibility into the algorithm, so we're just going to hope it puts everything in the right place. And this example of the Berlin Wall is, okay, before it fell, the Berlin Wall represented post-World War II, Cold War, Soviet rule, whatnot. But then what happens with life and the world in general is things change, and algorithms change too. And so maybe after the fall of the Berlin Wall, it would be clustered with content from the Velvet Revolution or from the reunification of Germany, the reunification of Europe. All content might shift and change, and your encyclopedia entry might be affected as a result of that, because you really can't tweak too many rules when you're clustering like this, because it's looking for patterns in your text. And this is where taxonomy terms really can help you, because they're going to be fixed, and you might reclassify your content, but they're still going to have the same original terms on it and maybe some new ones. And it might be able to put that into the same place time and time again. So I started with editorial content, news, thought leadership, announcements, events, research, kind of the who, what, when, where, why, and how of content. But then when I went into tech, it really expanded content types. There's learning content, technical documentation, release notes, demo videos, sales collateral, marketing materials. At the end of the day, though, it's all content. And regardless of what format it comes in, it still needs to be organized for discoverability. Because if you're spending all the money to create the content, you're going to want to be able to find it and serve it to the right people. So here's some examples of the most popular examples I've seen taxonomy usage at the enterprise level. When you're thinking about Amazon and Netflix, Amazon uses taxonomy terms to filter by size, color, availability, whatnot. Netflix, they will use taxonomy terms by genre. So comedy is the genre, romantic comedy is the subgenre, and then the sub-subgenre might be screwball romantic comedy. But that's all taxonomy terms. And you really want to make sure that they are properly applied to your content. Otherwise, your content isn't going to be relevant to the user who really needs it. We at Salesforce used taxonomy for measurement and inventory. We wanted to see how much content we had around AI. This was especially useful in the blog because they needed inventories, running inventories, and we actually built dashboards in a Salesforce product called Data Studio to say how many posts do we have with this taxonomy term on it. And we did that because we wanted to see what gaps there were in our body of content. And so taxonomy terms served that purpose for us. And for our gap analysis, so we could develop content where we needed it and also retire some. Another thing that Salesforce did really well is they shared taxonomies across teams. So blog, webinars, help and training, technical documentation, marketing, events, they all use the exact same taxonomy. They may not have used all the terms from the central taxonomy, but they used subsets. And what this allowed us to do was to discover content across the entire company. We didn't rely as much on the labels of the taxonomy terms. We relied more on the GUIDs, which are the unique IDs that are associated with each taxonomy term. So we would ingest content from all those sources that I told you about, put it in an index, and then when we wanted to serve content based on someone's, on a taxonomy term, we just looked for that GUID. And we also used it a lot for our events, taxonomies. You want to have your controlled vocabularies and whatnot for your events. Salesforce was big on events, so they constantly, we controlled the taxonomy for events, so everyone had to call the same thing. And what's really interesting is Salesforce used taxonomy for lead flow, and I find that Microsoft is doing the same thing. So when you go to the website and you have to fill out those pesky forms that ask for all your personal information, we also say, well, what industry are you in, and what role are you, and what's your business size, and what product are you interested in? Well, that's all information that sales needs. So that information is passed on to sales, but as you're profiling your user, you now associate those taxonomy terms to that user's profile, so that the next time they come to your website, you say, oh, I know something about this person. They're this, and this, and you can start serving content based on their the information they gave you on the lead. It's really valuable. So in no way is this an exhaustive list, but we've talked about the manual tagging. It was just kind of the OG of tagging. And then machine learning, we're talking here about LLMs, and prompts have to be created and maintained. And what we found in our research when they asked us, hey, look into machine learning to classify your content, we found that there were issues with repeatability. We just couldn't get the same results over and over. And the accuracy levels, once we tweaked the NLP rules, we got much higher accuracy than machine learning. And how it worked with NLP is we created a golden set of content at the recommendation of the Semaphore team, and that represented blog, events, announcements, all those content types. We took a representative body of content. We had a human, myself, tag it and say, this is how it should be properly tagged. This is what this content is about. Then we emulated that in the natural language processing. And so once we got that and we got to certainty weights that we liked, we were able to classify other bodies of content with the same strategy and approach. So it took upfront work, but then when you added a taxonomy term or you added a content type, you had to tweak the rules a little, but you didn't have to start from zero, which you sometimes had to do with machine learning, and retrain the model and consume all the content again. So data vectorization, we talked about how that clusters by patterns found in each asset. We just didn't have the paper trail that we wanted with that we got in natural language processing. You just have evidentiary proof when you're doing NLP, and you don't have as much in the vectorization, because if it looks at things differently or if the algorithm changes, you're going to get different results. One of the ways that we, at Salesforce, we were tagging by page type. And what I mean by that is there were some default terms that we could add to every single page. So if the product was Sales Cloud, we're obviously going to tag it with Product Sales Cloud, but we're also going to tag it with role of sales. And lead management, we probably would tag it with all those terms, because what we were finding is some people tag their content great, some not so great, and some not at all. And then some people just copied the page from before, a template, and inherited all the taxonomy terms from that other piece of content. So it just, by having at least some default tags right on a page, it was really helpful. And it's better to have some accurate tags than none at all. And folksonomy, we use that a lot in social. And the issue with, folksonomy is you don't want to, you start getting term creep too quickly. And people will call, finance and accounting, but other people will just call it finance. We had the same problem with healthcare and life sciences. And so it has the propensity to kind of go off the rails. So you have to be careful with taxonomy, but there definitely are use cases for it. Well, actually, taxonomy is a user, it's like a community source taxonomy. So they come up with the terms. Yeah. And a lot of, if you've ever worked in WordPress, you're able to just add terms. And that's great. But if you try and organize by that, you've got misspellings, you've got 3 versions or something like that. So a governed taxonomy is really helpful. So we already covered the top 3 items in this slide. And, you know, content strategists, and that's kind of what I've been de facto for my whole career. We're aiming to deliver the right content to the right user at the right time in their journey. And the higher accuracy we have in classifying content, the more you will delight the user. And that actually is a term that UXers use. And delighting the customer or the consumer is a keystone of good UX. So if you're going to give them the content they need, they're going to be happier and they're going to buy your product faster. Whereas if they have to go on a hunt and find the content that they need to make their decisions, it's just tougher for them. Taxonomy also allows for tailored content delivery. When we were talking about the sales lead example earlier, we have all those terms in that person's profile, so we can now serve them content that actually matters to them. And so that's really helpful. Now, what if your taxonomy doesn't have your industry, or if it doesn't have your role or your business size or whatever? And what research finds is that people, they identify with businesses and content similar to their organization. So you might not have medical devices and diagnostic, but you do have healthcare. They're probably going to look at healthcare. Or if they're a really small company, they might look at what content you have for small business. So it's okay. You don't have to have a taxonomy that covers everything. And another thing that we've learned is feeding, we were just talking about this before I started the talk, is feeding the taxonomy into your large language model or into your RAG search. And it is so helpful to do that so that the queries have context and they might know that your product is related to this industry or to this role. So not only can you classify your content and then the accurate terms are applied to it, but by the artificial intelligence, the machine learning knowing those relationships, it's going to find the content with those tags on it and deliver that higher in its search. So it's really helpful that the LLMs know what your taxonomy is. And then there's schema.org, which is really helpful with SEO. And then there's a newer term, GEO. And so what's schema.org? It's kind of a web standard. And you can start mapping your taxonomy terms. We're doing this at Microsoft right now, where you map the taxonomy terms to the schema categories. And your pages are going to end up, they're going to rank higher in Google searches if you do that, because it's looking for authoritative content. And they do this a lot for events. And so if you do the date and time and map it to that schema.org, the search engines know this is an event. And so if someone's asking about when is the concert at so-and-so, it's going to look and it's going to say, oh, they mapped these schema terms. This must be the accurate, the accurate content that we want to serve up first. Now, GEO is a newer term, and that's generative engine optimization. And it's a little like SEO, but you want to get your content ready for generative responses. And how do you do that? You make your content conversational. You use bullet points. But SEO mapping, the schema.org, it loves FAQs. And so does GEO, because if you have FAQs, that's a content type, they know people are asking questions, and they're going to rank not only for SEO, it's going to rank your page higher, but for the generative responses, it recognizes that it's an FAQ, and it's going to rank that result higher. Really, really interesting. So we are using, at Microsoft and Salesforce, we're using LLMs for a lot of things. So we're not just abandoning them. They do a lot of routine work. One of them is character counts. So if you need to rewrite, you've got a new design system for your website, and headlines could only be 28 characters. Well, you don't want to go in, open each page, and rewrite that and rewrite the description. You can have the LLMs do that for you. And not only can they rewrite for you using GPT, they can then go into your web hosting platform and they can edit the page and then republish it. So a human doesn't even have to be involved with those tasks. So we're doing that at scale. If you also need to scan all your pages to make sure they're ADA compliant, we're using LLMs for that. So there definitely are use cases. I just don't think classification is there yet, but it will be. And just judging by how fast technology is moving, could be sooner than we realize. So now we know the importance of accurately classified content. I just wanted to quickly dive a little deeper on the most popular technologies. So we know with RAG and vectorization that clustering, it's beneficial for certain applications. It's ideal for finding answers and surfacing related content. And the larger your body of content is, it improves the chances of finding relevant material. So at the blog at Salesforce, they had 2,400 posts. And I talked to someone last night, and he said, well, we have 7,000 pieces of documents. That's not a lot. If you have 50 or 100,000 documents, you're really going to get better answers with RAG and vectorization. So maybe when you get that much content, you're going to want to experiment with that as well. It does have its limitations. It identifies patterns, not meaning, and it groups by similarity and not by semantic intent. So, but a taxonomy will help search by adding semantic structure. So it tells you how things are organized, but it doesn't tell you about intent, because RAG and vectorization are, at the end of the day, they're recommendations. And then also there's algorithmic sensitivity. So if the algorithm or content changes, classification may shift. And that's something to consider as well. And the benefits for machine learning, there's faster processing time, it's scalable, it's really good at extracting data. So if you're going through hundreds or thousands of invoices, it knows who the ship to is, it knows all that stuff because that content is structured in a way. And it's really good at processing multiple formats. We experimented with Hugging Face, and basically out of the box, we did a side-by-side comparison of Semaphore and Hugging Face, and they kind of got the same score with a relative certainty of 75%. But as we started tweaking the rules with Semaphore, we said, oh, wow, we're getting into the mid-90s for accuracy, and we just couldn't replicate that as quickly and efficiently in machine learning application. And remember, they require prompt engineering and extensive testing to improve certainty with large language models. And AI promises consistency, but at this point, it's lacking trustworthiness, and it's also very resource intensive and costly to run. And so I don't want to speak badly about it because it works in so many different applications. But when you need certainty, if you're in the medical industry, is a 75% accuracy rate going to be okay? Or do you need something that's 92 or 99%, especially if it's diagnostic codes? So you kind of also have to choose the application, what you're trying to do, and what you're trying to achieve with this. And then natural language processing, we talked a lot about that. And if you don't change the content or you don't change the rules, you're going to get the same results over and over, which is great. And there also is causation and correlation analysis. I like to think of it as there's a paper trail when you're doing natural language processing, because you have evidence right here on the bottom, and you can't really see it that well, but you click on the word that it classified for, and it tells you exactly why it gave it the score it did. So if you really want to tinker with something and get it right, you then can repeat it because you know the logic that's behind that. And that golden set that we talked about, that represents your full body of content, once you emulate that, you can tag at scale with high accuracy, and you can do it over and over. And that is, we're doing another comparison right now with machine learning, and we're asking them, please run this through your classifier 5 times and give us the batch results for that, because we want to compare them and see if your machine learning classifier tagged everything the exact same way. And it may be as minor as them putting tags in the different order, but why is it doing that? Why can't you repeat the results? And that's one of the things that we're working on at Microsoft right now. And search, this example, search usually uses its own engine. It uses its own technology. Salesforce and Microsoft, they do very different technologies for search. But as you can see, the example on the right, it has this left bar right there, and that is filters, and it allows you to drill down. And those are taxonomy terms that are applied to each individual asset. And so instead of scrolling through all the search results like you have to on Microsoft's website, you actually can say, oh, I'm a tech company, so I'm going to click on tech, and I'm going to find the results on content vectorization that applies to my industry. So it really is, there are a lot of uses of having the taxonomy terms applied to your content. Excuse me. So because so much of machine learning and vectorization isn't transparent, it's harder to know what your content can do for you. So vectors don't support measurement or reporting, so we talked about that, and they don't show the attributes of your content in most cases. They're not really going to give you the aboutness of your content or tell you in what bucket it falls. And even prompt writing has limited precision, although the talk that I went to earlier about REMI and RAG search is really changing things too. So you're getting a lot more control, and to the point of technology changing, it might be, in 6 months, I might be giving a different presentation. And then what's great about taxonomies is you enable analysis of content attributes in a human understandable way. You help identify what top performing content is and what it's doing and what it's about. We used to just measure things by URL, but now you can't do that. You really have to measure by different facets of your content, and taxonomy terms allow that. And also, if you're uniformly using the same taxonomy, your whole organization can begin to speak the same language and find content the same way marketing does, that sales does, that learning does. So it's really interesting. And NLP, it shows the work. And so with the limitations of machine learning, you need increasingly larger sets, training sets to improve. We talked about the body of content just has to be bigger and bigger. And when there are major changes, whether they're new technologies, new content types, or you're adding a bunch to your taxonomy, you have to retrain those models, which can get time intensive and energy consumption. It could increase in that area. Whereas with NLP, you just have to change the rules. We talked also about accuracy and the levels of that, and in the medical situations where you just want to be super careful. And you want real-world context. Remember that machine learning, it doesn't learn dynamically. It just accumulates data for predictions. There are different technologies that are self-learning, but I don't know where they are with content classification now. So it often feels like a set it and pray approach, and sometimes that can work. I mean, I have talked to people and they're like, we'd be happy with 75% certainty. We'll just take everything that's 75, has a certainty score of 75 to 100, and we'll use that content, and that's fine. So it just depends on what your use cases are for the content. But I think that's risky. Okay, so I went to Microsoft Copilot just last Thursday as I was finishing this presentation, and I asked it, can large language models comprehend meaning in text? And the answer, it says they can approximate comprehension of meaning in text, but it's important to understand how they do it and where the limitations lie. And they simulate understanding by predicting the most likely next word or phrase. And this is not the same as human comprehension, which involves reasoning, experience, and intentionality. And this goes back to the human in the loop. And I thought this was a really interesting exercise because it validated a lot of the points. And the sessions that I went to earlier today, it kind of, this was brought up in one way or another that, it isn't the same as human comprehension. So LLMs can, one of the answers from a Copilot, and I want to be transparent here, it said they understand context. And I think they register context. I don't think understanding is the right word. So they're almost taking, all right, they're making a recommendation at context. Same thing with synonyms and nuance phrasing through statistical patterns and language. And I'm just reading this verbatim from the Copilot answer. They generate coherent, contextually appropriate responses that often feel like understanding. And they can perform tasks like summarization, rewriting, and translation with high accuracy. Like I was saying, that we're rewriting all those headlines and descriptions. And they use embeddings to represent meaning in vector space, allowing for similarity, comparisons, and clustering. Now, what they can't do is they don't have awareness, intent, or grounding in the real world. Their understanding is based on, it's not based on conceptual awareness, and they handle ambiguity or novel concepts without sufficient training data. So it was an interesting exercise, and it just was, I felt, a good way to kind of round this up before Q&A to say, so AI is still struggling with nuance and content comprehension. If you want to know how much content you have and what it's about, taxonomies and NLP are still doing that. And AI will improve over time, so stay tuned. And also, my lens is so focused on marketing and learning content that you really have to take your use case and your application and figure out what's the best solution for you and how accurate do you need to be. So I'm going to end it right there and open it up for questions. So do I have any questions? I know I'm keeping you all from happy hour too, so I appreciate your patience.
Any questions?
Anyone? Philippe?
Yeah, so how successful was that Slack feedback?
Okay.
Is that something that you think that would be consistent with a good classification?
So Philippe's question was, how successful was the Slack feedback loop at Salesforce? And it was, I would say we didn't hear from people 95% of the time. But it was, for the taxonomy team, it was our proof that we did our due diligence and we alerted the person that these were the suggested taxonomy terms, and we had one or two key players, and they really liked that. And they said, yes, this is right, or could you remove this term, or you forgot this one. So again, it goes back to that, the human in the loop in this case was the content creator. And it was, they cared a lot, and they wanted their content to appear in the right place. It was an extra step to do it, but Slack has these really cool triggers now where you just put something on an Excel spreadsheet and you hit X in one cell and it generates the message automatically. So it wasn't that much work, and it was really good and justifying to senior management why we were spending so much time on classifying content to get it right. So in a way, it was successful for the taxonomy team, and it showed that we were able to classify the content a lot better than the humans with a lot more care and thoroughness. And that was something that people would say, oh, I didn't even think it was about that, because content creators are so focused on the need for their content. They're not thinking about how content can be reused for other parties. And if you classify it this way and show that, oh, this also could be for this industry, because they weren't even thinking about that, but because of the alt labels and the keywords and everything else that was put in Semaphore, it tagged it for a bunch of unexpected use cases. Yeah. Sure.
I'm going to throw this here.
Okay.
Thanks, Arthur. It's really great.
Thank you.
I'm interested in the schema.org.
Mm-hmm.
Did you import that into Semaphore, number one, and number two, did you have any challenges with that, and how did it work? And maybe just more detail just on schema.org, because we have a lot of interest in that as well.
Yeah, and so schema.org is an established system where basically we had to change the HTML code on the web pages, and where it mapped, because schema.org has, I think it's not topics, is it called things? I think it's called things. Yeah, and so we had to map the code to say schema.org things, and then we would put the taxonomy term labels. And we found out that it was all the way at the top of the page, at least it is for Microsoft, and it doesn't have any bearing on anything else. So we're testing it out right now, but to me it's a no-brainer, because why not do it? And it's best, like I said earlier, for structured content. And it's person, place, organization, that's also really important, so the name of your company. And it just really verifies your content. So I would really go for a half dozen main categories, which is the event, the language, the location, the time, anything like that that is structured and easily understandable. It doesn't hurt to add that. Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Did you see any difference in the expected performance on sites that were delivered inside the United States versus, say, UK and Europe?
So unfortunately, with Salesforce, we were doing everything with auto-classification in English only. And there was this really bad replication process where some of the pages weren't inheriting. As we localized them, they lost their taxonomy terms. And so we actually had to go back. But it was an English first mindset, and what they wanted to, so we never even got to the performance, because we couldn't, it was really difficult at Salesforce to get the taxonomy terms on the page when it was localized. The English pages were fine, but when you started doing it, there was a glitch. And you're like, okay, now we're gonna have to reclassify all these, and we only had one language pack in English. And so we were gonna have to classify the US pages and then add those GUIDs to all the foreign pages. But we never got around to actually seeing what difference that made. But all the people who were building and localizing the web pages in the regions, they knew how important the taxonomy terms were, and they were looking for them because they know they needed to filter and they needed to serve them up on collection pages and whatnot. So it was really important to get the taxonomy term associated to the content.
On English only, did it show up in the UK?
No, it's a separate, separate language for the UK. Yeah, and actually Australia too, and Canada. So.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I learned a lot. I work in a healthcare organization, so our main challenge is the unstructured data, the CCDs, where the clinical notes, where the ICD-10 code or SNOMED CT are not coded, and can content classification and taxonomy, how can it help, or do you have any ideas or suggestion? What would be our next step to make it?
For diagnostic codes? Or?
it could be diagnostic codes, but there are also the ICD-10 codes, and then SNOMED CT. A lot of things are there in unstructured, like clinical notes from the doctors. Like for example, shortness of breath could be coded as pneumonia, like as an example.
Yeah, and one person on my team, I wish he were here to answer that question because he used to do medical coding.
Okay.
And he used natural language processing to do that. And so it definitely is doable. I think what the alternative labels or the alternate labels are really important in that, because you can start creating relationships from shortness of breath to pneumonia or whatever, so you could get potential diagnoses or something like that. So it definitely, and also with fact extraction, it can do that. The NLP does really well at entity and fact extraction. So it can actually look for a lot of those things. So I definitely think natural language processing is strong for healthcare, and that's why I hired this person to do the NLP classification, because I started the training and I said this is a dedicated role to do this, and he kind of dove in and came up with their Semaphore will give you about 1,000 different commands that you can use as a base, and then you tweak the rules for however you need them to be for your application. And we also had professional services at Semaphore, so they helped us a lot too.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. We got.
That's something that on the morphologic side, I end up doing that a lot, combining search with ontologies, because you have your taxonomy and your ontologies just in graph, and you try to query them with traditional graph query techniques like Sparkle. You're very generally limited to exact text searches or things that at best in regular expressions. So when you combine things like taxonomies and thesauruses with something that is a more general purpose search technology, you start to be able to basically take your search terms and use your taxonomy to use what we call term expansion to get kind of like your alt labels and your related terms. And then you can use that to search through the entirety of the text documents to find things that find both the structured and the unstructured parts of it. And I find that gives you a lot more results than just trying to find the exact term somewhere in your taxonomy.
Yeah, and we're actually having to create a taxonomy for Microsoft Security Division, and we're doing a lot of term frequency and n-grams to kind of find, we're taking the full body of content from their security content and coming up with a taxonomy, and that's just the start. But then you start adding the alternative labels and the associations and whatnot. And that's, again, where you need a human in the loop, and you have to go to the subject matter experts and say, this is the hunch that we have for your potential taxonomy terms. Can you help us validate that? So I think your methods are really relevant to that. Any other questions? No? Great. Thank you so much for your time.